Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a true masterpiece of visual storytelling, one that is so psychologically accurate that actual psychiatrists have studied its antagonist. We're going to explore Naoki Urasawa's critically acclaimed anime series, Monster. But we aren't just doing a simple plot recap today. We're taking a profoundly grounded, deeply analytical look at the psychology, the history, and the philosophy woven throughout this incredible narrative. As our source material points out, this isn't your typical action-packed show. It's a slow burn, incredibly realistic psychological thriller that really demands deep reflection. It treats its audience with immense respect, basically asking us to look directly into the darkest shadows of the human psyche. Okay, so here's our roadmap for dissecting these dense themes of morality and trauma today. We'll start with the doctor's dilemma, look into the anatomy of a monster, explore a clash of philosophies, talk about the weight of identity, and finally ask, born or made? Let's get right into it. Section 1, The Doctor's Dilemma, the choice that shook Central Europe. So to really grasp the world of Monster, we gotta start with our main guy, Dr. Kenzo Tenma. He's this brilliant, incredibly compassionate Japanese neurosurgeon working at Eisler Memorial Hospital in West Germany back in the 1980s. And Tenma is the kind of doctor who takes his duty to human life absolutely seriously. But then he gets hit with an impossible choice. On one hand, hospital management is breathing down his neck to operate on the city's mayor, a guy with a ton of political power who arrived later. But on the other hand, a young boy named Johan was brought in first. He's in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head. Defying all that utilitarian hospital politics, Tenma just goes with his gut. The morally pure choice, right? He operates on the kid, the boy lives, the mayor actually dies, and Tenma's career? Totally ruined. But hey, his conscience is clear. Or, well, so he thinks. Because, no good deed goes unpunished. Fast forward a few years, that little boy Tenma saved, he vanished, only to pop back into Tenma's life as a young man. And it happens in this literally jaw-dropping sequence. Tenma tracks down one of his patients, Adolf Junkers, only to find him held at gunpoint by, you guessed it, that very same boy, Johan. And despite Tenma begging him to stop, Johan just casually, completely coldly executes Junkers right in front of him. He even has the nerve to thank Tenma for saving his life back then, promising he'd never hurt the doctor. It's just this absolutely chilling moment where it hits Tenma. His pure act of mercy literally unleashed a remorseless serial killer onto the world. Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Monster. Dissecting Johan Liebert. Now, putting on our clinical hats for a second, we really need to understand what kind of antagonist we're dealing with here. Because Johan isn't out there throwing punches. He is this terrifyingly calm force of nature. And what's super fascinating is how researchers have actually mapped Sigmund Freud's tripartite psyche straight onto Johan's incredibly distorted behavior. Think about the id, that's the primitive, impulsive part of the mind. In Johan, this drives his destructive impulses and just pure nihilism. It's the engine of his chaos. Then there's his ego, the rational part that deals with reality. He uses this to regulate his actions strategically, which lets him manipulate people perfectly. But his superego, the moral compass, it's pretty much non-existent. The only tiny shred of it is tied to his attachment to his twin sister, Anna, who goes by Nina. And this whole psychological makeup, it completely hits the nail on the head for Machiavellianism. That's a dark personality trait defined by extreme manipulativeness, emotional detachment, and just a total callous disregard for morality. Johan is literally the poster child for this. I mean, his allure is almost supernatural. He's got this terrifying charisma that lets him bend followers and victims to his will without ever laying a finger on them. He literally just whispers the right words, taps into the right traumas, and people gladly commit absolute atrocities for him. Section 3, A Clash of Philosophies, the Dialectic of Light and Dark. You see, this explainer wouldn't be complete without touching on the fact that this story is way less about physical brawls and much more about an ideological war. It's Johan's absolute darkness versus Dr. Tenma's unwavering humanism. And this entire conflict is perfectly anchored by Johan's signature, bone-chilling quote, "The only thing equal for all is death." That's not just some edgy villain line. It's a profound, deeply unsettling philosophical stance. Johan looks at life as this never-ending cycle of pain and suffering that's completely stripped of any objective meaning. To him, death is the ultimate equalizer, the only certainty that cuts through wealth, status, or power. He basically wants to expose the existential void he believes is hiding inside all of us. And this just brilliantly sets up the philosophical foil at the heart of the story. On one side, you have Johann's nihilism. It draws heavily from philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer, the idea that life is just futile suffering and traditional values are completely made-up illusions. And then on the other side, you have Tenma. His outlook is rooted in the ethical theories of Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill. Tenma firmly believes that every single human life has inherent worth and dignity. He fights for compassion, he fights for second chances, and for that classic utilitarian principle of promoting the greatest good. No matter what Johan throws at him, Tenma just absolutely refuses to succumb to the abyss.
All right, section 4, the weight of identity, erasure and rebirth. So a huge question here. How does someone even become a Johan, right? He didn't just magically appear out of thin air. One of the most heartbreaking details in the entire narrative is that Johan and his twin sister Nina were never even given birth names by their mother. Their identities were completely fractured from day one. And the story grounds this fictional trauma in some very harsh, real-world geopolitical realities. It takes us from the mid-century Cold War division right through to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of Czechoslovakia to show us exactly how a society can systematically strip away a person's individual identity. And it's right in the middle of this historical turmoil that the series introduces this fictional but honestly entirely plausible East German orphanage known as Kinderheim 511. Now, I say orphanage, but Kinderheim 511 was absolutely not an orphanage. It was a site for secret, state-sponsored psychological conditioning and eugenics experiments. People like the psychiatrist Franz Bonaparte use literally horrifying methods to break children's minds, all to create these quote-unquote perfect soldiers. They deliberately withheld the kids' birth names. They completely blurred their sense of self, like making the twins dress completely identically so they couldn't even tell themselves apart. The trauma they inflicted was so severe that it actively fostered dissociative identity disorder. It effectively erased who these kids were, leaving behind this massive, empty void. A void that, unfortunately, monsters could easily step right into. Which brings us to our fifth and final section, born or made, the ultimate ambiguity. Now, while Johan clearly succumbed entirely to that darkness, it's so important to note that other characters who went through the exact same horrors at Kinderheim 511, like the incredibly resilient journalist Wolfgang Grimmer, chose a completely different path. They chose the grueling work of actually relearning human emotion. And that contrast is absolutely vital, because as this massive story wraps up, it flat out refuses to spoon-feed us any easy answers. Without spoiling the entire climax for you, I'll just say this. Johan ultimately escapes from a hospital bed, leaving behind nothing but an empty mattress. The source material is very deliberate here. It refuses to give us a neat, tidy conclusion about where he went, what his ultimate fate is, or if his inner nature ever fundamentally changed. So we're left staring at this final, incredibly provocative question. A question the series leaves entirely up to us. Is a monster born or created by society? Can the horrific, unspeakable things Johan did be justified, or at least understood through the lens of his unimaginable childhood trauma? Or is he just inherently evil by nature? Monster doesn't hand you the answer. It lays out all the pieces, the intense psychology, the dark history, the heavy philosophy, and basically asks you to look inward and decide for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive leaves you with a whole lot to chew on.